Welcome, everyone. I think most of us are our regulars. Elizabeth, I don't recognize you necessarily as one of our regulars. I presume you were invited by Alan. But
Yes, I
okay,
have
great.
been
So
before.
welcome.
I've been at one of your a few of
Oh,
your
good. Okay, good.
sessions.
So anyway, so tonight, um, before we dive into the topic for the evening, which is the rainbow in ancient context, Alan has come back from another rather extensive trip of Israel. And I know in the past people have been very interested in Alan's both pictures and discussions of what goes on in Israel. So we're going to devote, I projected a half an hour. If we run long, so we run long. There's no end to this class. We just keep going along. So Alan, I will turn it over to you, and you can, as you know,
Okay.
display your photographs.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
I'm going to screen share first, make sure the check boxes are in. They're checked in, and that's not the right. I need the one with the slides, and that would be short. I call it. I've done a series of reducing the numbers of pictures from long, short to shorter. So this one is defined shorter. Hopefully that doesn't carry anything. Okay, let me clean
Hey,
things up.
look at that.
One up, okay. Okay, so you guys can see the
Yes.
introduction here. Okay, so I want to stress at the request of several people, including the rabbi, to do just not just go through slides, but to give a sense of what life was like that might be different now or was during the war or before the war, the other trips I've made. So, as I tell you, the primary purposes of the visit, which are started here, the World Union for Progressive Judaism, the um, the ordinations of new Israeli Reform rabbis and the new European Reform rabbis. Those would be kind of the themes that are thread through some other pictures and points. So, by way of answering the first question, things are different now since the ceasefire and the living hostages have actually been released earlier in October, a couple weeks before I got to Israel this time. So that meant that there were no sirens and no rockets. That meant that people were felt a little safer, but not totally relaxed because so many people are, first of all, there's this nervousness of whether the ceasefire will hold, but that's not a surprise. Other parts noteworthy though are that there are still thousands of people who've never been able to go back to their homes in the south near the Gaza area because of destruction of the October 7th events, and also in the north, although that part is getting to be less and less, where the shooting from Lebanon affected people having to evacuate. But still, there are tens of thousands of reservists because the war still exists, even though these good things have happened. The army is still keeping tens of thousands of reservists in on duty, is what I would say. And the last point related to how things are is the thousands of people who were injured, not the last thing, but the next to last thing, thousands of people have are still being recovered from physical and mental injuries from October 7th and the 2 years of the war. And the last part I would say is that there's a sense that everybody, or that I know, which is not all 10 million Israelis, there's a sense of people are mourning losses. They know people, or in my case, I only know one person, but know people who know people. So there's a sense of loss that people are mourning, and if the right word is healing from the losses, and that process is still going on. So that would be my answer to the question of how do people feel and how do they feel differently than when I was there in June and July. Okay, and also I want to encourage people to, I'll try to go a little fast to save time, but please feel free And Mike, Rabbi, help me if somebody raises their hand digitally or raises their hand physically that I don't see it, call it to my attention because
Yeah, I can see your images and your
yeah.
actual and virtual hands. So
And
just wave
yeah,
at me if you
I
have
don't want to
those.
save comments and questions to the end. I want to do it as they
Right,
happen.
right.
Okay, right. Okay, so the World Union for Progressive Judaism, and again, I never can be sure of an audience of any size, so I'll be a little do a little defining. The reform movement in the world has, the way I see it, is three branches. The Union for Reform Judaism, which are the synagogues over the North America, which is US and Canada, the Israeli Movement for Progressive and Reform Judaism, which is 54 synagogues in the state of Israel, and then the rest is the World Union, which represents, I'm not sure the total number of synagogues, but there's 50 countries and maybe 100 or plus synagogues because many of these places are very tiny. But the ones like in England and Brazil and some of the big Argentina, there are several synagogues. So, but there are 50 countries represented. They get together. We get together every few years. To review things that are going on and to continue what conferences like that do on different topics. Okay, so that didn't work. Where am I here? Click. Okay, so I'm just giving you a sense. The time of the year as opposed to the summer is like a mild fall. So like a lot of the sessions were held outdoors in groups on different themes such as education or on anti-Semitism. They're the themes that wouldn't surprise you, except the attendees are coming from a perspective of what's different in their countries. Um, that was the World Union primarily. I'll come back to that in a little while. The next day, which happened to be Rosh Chodesh for Hezvan, and so on Rosh Chodesh, the women of the wall conduct a worship service at the Kotel in the women's section, and I and other men attend support for that, even though we don't go to the service. But we do gather outside the entrance, and so you're seeing Anat Hoffman, the founder of the Women of the Wall, and other roles she's had over 30 years. And so I'll just flip a few pictures. The woman in the center, the tall woman, is the head, Orly Erez Levkovsky. She's head of the Israeli Religious Action Center, which is the Israeli version of our American social action arm called the Religious Action Center, which is on the woman on the right is Heidi Siegel. She's head of what's called the Commission on Social Action, and the other two women are the leaders of the Women for Reform Judaism. So maybe by way of additional orientation, this was an unusually large attendance at the Women of the Wall and some of the other things because at the same time of the World Union was held the World Zionist Congress, which I'll come to briefly during some more slides. The World Zionist Congress was also held, and so that and the Women for Reform Judaism timed one of their gatherings. So we had lots of international visitors, and that kind of made it well for me. Made it very more meaningful. So at the Kotel, the Western Wall is divided into women's areas and men's areas. The part I'm showing you is the entrance for the women, and to the left, where there's the guard in the yellow jacket, that's where us men hang around while the women go down to the service itself. On the other side is the men's section, which is of the area where the dividing line in the worship section is much bigger for the men as it is grown by the Kotel rabbi's edict to give less space to women, not because statistically there's less women, just because that's how the Haredi and the rabbi treats allowing space for both genders. This is some of our group. These things are held at 7 o'clock in the morning, Israel time. And by the way, they're all what you're about to see is pictures that I took during the service from the women's section, because one of the things that I do, and you can do it yourselves tomorrow, is when it's 7 o'clock in the morning on the first day of the month, which will be 2 days. It'll be Friday morning, the first day of Kislev, at 9 o'clock California time. The service will be held, and they've set up a Facebook video. And so while I was standing there waiting for the women to do their worship, I actually watched this over FaceTime from the internet, standing at the plaza. I felt a little uncomfortable doing, not from a religious reason, other than it was kind of strange to be looking at the internet while I'm standing at the coat. So these pictures are various of our mostly American women who are being honored for attending the service on Rosh Chodesh. Here is three generations. The woman on the left is Rabbi Ilana Rubinstein, who's a Reform rabbi who I first met when she was in St. Petersburg, Russia. And on the right is her daughter, Julia Magalis, who's a rabbi for a long time in Johannesburg, South Africa, and now in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And in the middle is Julia's daughter, Victoria, who had just become bat mitzvah the previous weekend. So she got to, or was honored by doing some blessings at the wall.
Yeah, Stephen, have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You need to unmute, Stephen. You're muted, Stephen.
What is the thing that looks like an elevated railroad?
Oh, yeah, back up.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Oh, what happened? I know what you mean. So there is a what happened here?
The Mugrab Gate.
I know I'm going the wrong way. I'm going.
Uh,
Oh, here, I'm back there now. With that part.
Yeah.
Okay. So someplace in the last 20, Michael, you can describe this better probably, but someplace in the last 20 years, they replaced the ways in which um, the Arabs could actually go to the Dome of the Rock at the top, right?
Yeah, my understanding actually is when I was there, so it's at least 30 years.
Okay.
That there's a gate called the Mugrab Gate, and it's a gate for Israelis and tourists. There are other gates to the Temple Mount which are only for Muslims to pray, but this one is where you enter, certainly as an Israeli or a tourist, and you enter it from the Western Wall Plaza area. Although I haven't been through that ramp.
Me
Um,
neither. Me neither. Right.
oh,
So it is a strange and ugly structure. No matter where you stand in the area outside of the hotel, it's just and so it has some political and application. But sorry, we're not giving you probably the most detailed answer. But
yeah,
ask.
you just used to climb a stairway up there,
That's
and
right.
then they created this thing, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was to separate it from the prayer area, so people in the prayer area wouldn't be seeing tourists going up to
If
the
I'm
Western Wall.
walking through the Armenian quarter on my way to the Jewish quarter to the wall on a Friday, the security people are watching to make sure I don't go to a non-Jewish area, because there are these rules about only Jews. Jews can't go some places, for respect to the Muslims, and so these are I guess the moving parts that go into creating these rules, I guess. Okay. Um, I will not stop on defining all these fancy other roles these people have, but these are leaders in the reform movement in America, and I did that part already. Okay, so this is just to get you a sense that we had an unusually large group of women this is in the women's area as seen through Facebook's video. Thank you, because I wasn't there. The next thing we did is we actually went to an unveiling memorial service for Rabbi Stanley Davis, who was the head of the Reform Zionists of America, the Reform movement in America for many years. And when he died, he was buried in a cemetery outside of Jerusalem, where other Reform leaders are used that cemetery if they want to be buried in Israel. And so we had a nice a period of time where a lot of the same people who went to the conferences, came together to honor Stan, who was a good friend of the movement and of all the people here. On the left is Anna Kislowski, who's the head of the reform movement, Israeli reform movement in IMPJ, and the right is Stan's daughter. Okay, and I already showed some of these people already. So this is the head of the Women for Reform Judaism. So the next day we had a service in an area in the Kotel, which is called the Egalitarian Plaza. This was an attempt to create a proper worship area where men and women could pray together, and the politics of it got it partway through, but got stalled in 2016. And as it stands now, it's still stalled for religious and political reasons. So when you go to the plaza, you're going down near to the wall on the southern part of the actual Kotel onto a platform, but you don't actually touch the screen, the wall. So again, I've been at many of these, and this was unusually large because of all the groups were in town. So it's a weekday service. You'll see people wearing tallit. You'll see people wearing tefillin, and so it's a proper reform service with lots
And
of
I'll just comment, Alan. So
yeah.
what you're looking at is on the right-hand side is the Western Wall, and that structure ahead is that structure going up to the Mugrab Gate, and on the other side of that structure, directly ahead of us, is the traditional Western Wall.
Right. Exactly. And is Rosemary didn't join us, right? My friend Rosemary. Okay. So one of my sensitivities that I did in this trip is I have a friend from Virginia through the Central Synagogue who is wheelchair bound. And so and I feel that Israel, like America, does a pretty good job on accessibility for people like Rosemary, but Jerusalem is especially challenging if you compare it to less hilly cities. And so when you see these steps, you'll find that there's also a lift, an elevator that was created to allow people who can't use steps to get to the lower level at the Egalitarian Plaza. So I have a couple more shots that I took specifically to inform one of my friends when she sees the slides. The complex where the World Union is held is also the place called Beit Shmuel. It's a complex obtained from Hebrew Union College in the 50s and now houses the World Union and the Reform Movement. And so Rabbi Sergio Berkman, who is in the white shirt, gave us a tour and some of the renovations and things that was going on. Next year will be the 100th year that the World Union was created. It's created by a woman, or invented or thought of in 1926 by Lily Montagu is her name. And she saw the parts going on in Europe and in America and saw a need for the Jewish communities around the world, and that caused the World Union to be invented. And so our conference next time will be in June. If you would like to go, the dates are there. In June, it will be in London. Let's see, I'm not going to do music here, but this is an example. There's a 4-story building in the center place. There's lots of meetings and also meals, but this is the view you get from the Beit Shmuel at the upper floor. You get to look at the old city, and this is at the at night. So it was actually a really nice setting in that. Oops, that's
Yeah,
okay.
we're fine. You're hearing a noise when anyone enters. Yeah, Lois has your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think I told you this, Alan, but Beit Shmuel was originally a like a hostel. And I stayed there years ago, and it was in the time, I'm sure they've, gotten rid of all these separate rooms. We all had separate rooms, of course, but there were no telephones. You had to stand in line to use a telephone. And all these soldiers who were put up there would, we would give them priority. And do you remember, Alan, and anyone else who was in Israel in the olden days? There were tokens that you used in a telephone
Right.
called a simonim.
Hmm.
And that is what I remember from Beit Shmuel.
And they had a
Okay.
hole in the middle.
Right,
So you
right.
could wear them around your neck on a
And you
string.
needed a gazillion of them to make a phone call.
So by the time I became a regular attendee in 2011, I had cell phones. But
Yeah, I
to your
know.
point, though, the complex housed, among other things, use groups, the equivalent of our Nifty in the U.S. Netzer. They would use those housing guest rooms, you might call them, but other people like you, Lois, and myself, when we visited, we could actually rent rooms instead of going to a hotel or bed and breakfast.
Correct.
And,
Exactly.
and so that stopped at COVID time for various reasons, but is back on. So now people who came to this conference, I don't know if there's more or less numbers of rooms. Now there are guest rooms that you can pay for and get it, and it includes breakfast, the typical Israeli, setup. So yes,
I think what's amazing is what you're showing, Alan, is that from what to us, it was a downscale place to stay, and it has the most incredible views of the old city of anywhere.
in
Like
nine,
the King David, I think this is
yeah,
better than the King David's view.
well, it's the other direction. You will see a picture of it when I get to the HUC
And I'll comment, and Alan, I'm pretty sure you're going to take up the whole hour. But I will comment that when HUC started in Jerusalem, it was an archaeological school because they wouldn't countenance the idea of a reform seminary. And they gave them the absolute worst place in Jerusalem to be, namely on the border with Jordan.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
if
yeah.
you weren't careful, there would be Jordanian soldiers shooting at you. So there
exactly.
were no windows looking at the view you are talking about. And then, of course, in 67, once Jerusalem fell to the Israelis, it becomes the best place in Jerusalem. So it's ironic in that regard.
Wait a minute, I messed up here. I hit my
There
mouse.
used to be holes in the walls
Oh,
too,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
around there to show you where the fighting happened.
Yep.
So that's right. So oh, the other thing about the archaeological part that remind me, Michael, that I know you know, is that Nelson Gluck, who was, I think, head of the reform movement in around the time of 1950,
Hmm.
he invented this idea that Israeli and rabbinic students should spend a year in Israel before they finish as part of their studies to become American rabbis. And his logic was there were two things that he wanted students who traveled to Israel for a year was to learn Hebrew and to understand the archaeological history of Israel. So in the HUC camp room, there's an archaeological room, and the point that you
Well,
already
there's an archaeological museum.
exactly. All
Yes.
of that was conceived by Nelson Gluck because his idea is this is how you immerse a rabbinic student about Israel before they do their rabbinic duties in US. So it's still part of I mean, it's no surprise that that's important, but it was very important to the people who created, which now we are in our 54th or 55th year that people like you, Rabbi, spent a year in Israel. You were in the middle of that, but today it's been a long time that we've been doing that, and it's been
So I,
very
I was there 27 years ago and spent a year
pretty
there.
much in the middle then, right? When it
Hmm.
was halfway where we are now. Okay, so this is a Shabbat service on Saturday morning. A lot of people got honored. There were donors who actually paid for some Torahs to give to some of the smaller communities that don't have Torahs. So this you're just seeing a sense of that. After services, one of the speakers was Rabbi David Saperstein. For 40 years, he was head of the Religious Action Center in Washington, D.C., and for 1 year, he was actually head of the World Union in Israel. And he spoke about, and then not Rabbi, President Obama appointed him to be the ambassador for international religious freedom. So during the last 2 or 3 years of the Obama administration, his job was to travel around the world and help deal with problems related to religious freedom, which includes anti-Semitism, but it includes a lot of other things. And so this speech was a little bit of an update and more than a little depressing about some of the challenges in Israel and America and other countries which have moved to a more what's the right? Well, I'm going to use right wing, but there's a conservative or,
Mhm.
sociologically has made it more challenging for religious freedom in a lot of places, in not just in non-democracies, but of course in countries like, and so he painted this picture and then painted this, challenges of what can be done for at least the U.S. and Israel to make the next few years better and things we can help promote it within our own country. The woman next I mentioned Orly already before, so she spoke about some of the challenges in Israel, which I already summarized at the beginning about relating to shared society. I didn't say all that at that point, but one of the themes in the reform movement in Israel is pluralism and shared society with Palestinians and fighting racism because racism in Israel is consisting of being anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian, and that manifests itself even in the news. I'm sure you've noticed the uprise in settler violence, where Jewish settlers in the West Bank are involved in doing violence against the Palestinians. So the Religious Action Center in Israel campaigns, legislates, does all the things they can do to help reduce this kind of problem. So one of the things that still continues are the Saturday night gatherings and supporting, fighting for democracy. So as you probably know, in Israel, like here, the government in Israel is trying to take away certain rights and values that will weaken in courts, especially. And so the weekly gathering by the Reform movement is to hold a Havdalah music session and say the blessings for Havdalah in Jerusalem and in Israel and in Tel Aviv. And so since we were in Jerusalem, this is our group from the World Union just before we went to the rally in Jerusalem. So the speeches have now changed from releasing the hostages, which have been successfully accomplished, to still this concern that the government is weakening the courts and doing things that weaken the democracy in the opinion of those of us who represent the progressive side. Obviously, the other side doesn't see it the way, but the reform movement, I'm part of what I would say the reform movement's purposes in these protests, of which, except for the 50 or 75 people who get together for Havdalah, the other thousands are the ones you read about in the paper in these rallies every Saturday night, which have been going on since January of 2023. So this is just a small snapshot of the World Zionist Congress. So the World Zionist Congress is held at the creation of Theodor Herzl in 1897. The American arm of that, the American Zionist movement, which I am a member of the board, was held a luncheon, and several, I'm going to say several hundred people from the 54 different Zionist organizations, youth groups, left wing, right wing. There's all kinds of Hadassah, all kinds of groups in America who identify women, National Council of Jewish Women, and many other groups are, actively part of supporting Israel through the Zionist movement. And Herbert Bloch, and a few other speakers talked to us about that. Separately, and this was the beginning of the Congress, so separately there are reports on what was accomplished and what was not accomplished, I guess you would say, but it's an ongoing thing, and it's an important piece of Israelis ongoing work, and then lots of money gets distributed through the World Zionist Organization. Questions? No, keep going. All right. And this is a shot of the lunch, the gathering of everybody. So instead of letting us just sit with our own friends, they mixed us up with different groups. It was too short of a time to actually get to know people from groups that you didn't know, but they had good intention. It was fine. The food was good too. Israeli food, of course. I went to both of my Jerusalem Reform synagogues. So this is just a couple of shots of Kahilat Harel, which is right near the old city. It's the first Reform synagogue created in Israel in 1958. And so this is just a couple of snapshots of what a small synagogue looks like in Jerusalem. A Reform synagogue looks like. This is the cantor Evan Cohn on the left, and Rabbi Ada Zavidoff on the right, and in her office. The Hebrew Union College had its board of governors in town just because of the World Zionist Congress, partly, and so because many of the board members are delegates to the Congress, and so they hosted a tour of the Tower of David Museum, which Michael, I don't know if you've been there,
Many times.
but I think in the last 2 or 3 years, they put a lot of money into renovating it. I had been to the light show before, but not the inside so much. So we got a docent tour, and if this looks familiar, then they haven't changed. Well, the
Yeah,
building.
I mean, I've been there many, many times going back 30, 40 years,
Okay.
and they've done a lot of renovation.
Yeah, and they've made it more. This is the seating area because they do a light show on the wall itself on the tower to the right, which we're not facing, and I've done that a few times. Um, and since this was like 6 in the evening, but it was after the daylight saving had changed, so that's why it's already dark. So you get a sense of the biblical period when the Tower of David was actually
Yeah, and the entire area is devoted. It's a museum of the history of Jerusalem.
That's right. And they have added some high-tech stuff. So this is a model of the second temple, and there's a model of and text to support the introduction, the early Christianity, the Holy Sepulchre. But this model is like walking distance to the real Holy Sepulchre because this is in the at the entrance to the Java Gate, and not far from there is the Christian Quarter, and you could go look at the original site if you're actually. So it's kind of an interesting museum that's set near the real historical site, but that's what's in the museum. This is another example. If you noticed all those unevenness areas in the Tower of David, this is the way they address accessibility with
Yeah,
the.
and that's new. I mean, Jerusalem would be impossible for someone on a wheelchair without these kinds of things.
Absolutely. And even with these things, there's compromise.
Challenging, yeah.
Yeah, right. So the new place is within the last couple of years, or maybe a year, they took the building of 1948 that was the original Knesset on King George Street in Jerusalem, and they made a museum called the Museum of the Knesset. So it's not where and this was used as the real legislative center for 10 or 15 years until the building, which you probably have seen pictures of, the big today's Knesset, maybe 5 miles away from this. But the tour is quite informed because not only is you get the feeling you were in the original building at the founding of the country, but you also get to see movies and a good tour guide who's describing how did they pass laws, because the way in which laws are passed in a parliamentary system like Israel is similar but different. They have these different readings and they talked about the politics of the multiple parties. So it was a very educational hour-and-a-half tour and some videos of well-known politicians, which you can see here. Now we come to one of the major reasons that I went, which was the ordination of the new Israeli rabbis, okay, which is held now in both in the synagogue, which Michael, you probably remember in the building. HUC has its own synagogue, but they also used for so there was a weekday service held in the morning at 9 o'clock. And at 11, the ordination was held, which was held in the new plaza, which is outside. Oops, I skipped around. Well, anyway, I wanted to show off. So I have one good friend in both of these ordinations. The woman on the left, Ganit Jensel, is become a rabbi. And then, and now we're outside at the plaza, and I got another view that I wanted to show off. Anyway, this is Nachman Shai, who's the current dean of HUC. He was in politics before as the Minister of Internal Affairs, and now he's the dean. He's been there about a year or two now. And then, so this is how the plaza is set up with a little bit of a shielding of sunlight. It wasn't really that hot, but it would be nice to have if there was hot. And this is Andrew Rehfeld, who's president of HUC over all the campuses in the US and in Israel. Okay, and this is Rabbi Talia Avnan, who's the head of the rabbinics program for the Israeli students. So she doesn't, well, technically her job is the students who go to HUC who are Israelis who want to become Reform rabbis. That's done in parallel with the 1 year North American rabbis like Rabbi Mike. And so Talia's role is focused on the Israeli students, and another rabbi, Reuven Greenveld, who was the head of the program when, do you remember,
It was
Mike?
Michael Marmer when I was there.
Oh, okay, good. Well, he's a prominent professor and incredibly important guy who's still a part of HUC. And he's an Israeli, and when you were there, Michael was, but the current head guy is an American rabbi, but that's not here nor there. So these are just some of the scenes as you go through the ordination. Is what you'd expect in any graduation or ordination of blessings and awards and announcements. And I show this picture because one of the other temples that I'm a member of in Jerusalem, which we'll come to some more pictures, the woman in the center became a rabbi, and the man in the middle is the Rabbi Odette Mazur, and the woman on the right is Rabbi Debbie Haim, and the two of them are rabbis in the Reform Temple, and Boaz at the left is the music director for the temple. So these are my friends from my temple in the Jerusalem um, group, and I got a picture of myself. Okay, so the next day or that evening and the next day was Shabbat. And so these are pictures from the Shabbat dinner that one of the people in the neighborhood invited me to join for their meeting. And during the morning, Shabbat morning, there was services which are not unlike Reform services here, except it's not all in Hebrew when they have guests. So this particular meeting had a whole bunch of Australians, and so the service had more English than a lot of times I've gone to services in Jerusalem. But what they have up on the wall is the Declaration of Independence for the State of Israel, which is a counterpart to the ones that the American Declaration of Independence, um, but does get featured like this in synagogues. Not every synagogue, but it gets featured like this one on the wall here with the signatures of Ben Gurion and the other leaders. That would be the ones you see if you go to American History Declaration of Independence, where you see Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and the American version of that, all those signatures. Okay. Now we're back to the Tel Aviv version of the Saturday night rally, which is what's been going on, like I said earlier, with the same shift from hostage freedom to democracy freedom. But the night I was there at the first weekend of November was also the 30th anniversary of the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. So there was a sort of a theme that worked into the rally, honoring the memory of Prime Minister Rabin. And they're still tracking because as of now, but certainly as of November 1st, which was the day I took this picture, these are the number of days and hours and minutes and seconds from the 29th day of the sixth of the 629 on October 7th. So they're still paying attention till the last hostage actually gets home. Okay, and okay, now I'm going to shift to Germany. I got a list of things to check. I don't want to spend time on looking through it, although I did go to most of these places, and I'll touch on a few pictures of them. This I went with the purpose of supporting and honoring a friend of mine, Ala Middleman, who has been a educator, Jewish educator in St. Petersburg, Russia, who I met in 2009 through the World Union and have stayed in touch with her. And so I'd never been to Berlin, so I got to go to the Jewish Museum of Berlin. I got to go to the Brandenburg Gate. I'm doing this as fast as I can, but stop me if you want to talk to any of it.
So
But
I'll just mention I was in Berlin in 1980 when it was still East and West, and I
okay.
definitely could not go to the Vandenberg Gate. There was barbed wire and machine guns there.
I was in Germany in 1986 when I didn't get anywhere near Berlin. I was in West Germany on a business trip. Um, so this Brandon McGart doesn't have a separate exhibit, but they have some historical pictures mounted on these posts in the outdoors plaza around the gate itself. But down the street, about 2 blocks ago, but from there's this, I'm going to say, like a museum, actually. It's a museum, and it's got this title called The Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. And outside, struck, and it's effectively thought of as a Holocaust museum in Berlin, but it has this other title, and in this park or this large area, an architect put together what looks like coffins with 2,711 hunks of stone, with which, from what best I can tell from looking into it, the number doesn't have any significance of relating to the 6 million or other things, but it's a symbolism to honor the Jews of Europe, the way it's worded, not of Germany and not of Berlin. Inside the building on the lower floor, there are some historical It's not a huge museum. There's 3 or 4 rooms, but this one shows part of the period of the Holocaust from 1933 to 37. And this is another view on the ground where the tall concrete symbols are displayed. This is my friend Alla as she's becoming a rabbi. We went to an Italian restaurant in Berlin, and I became aware through actually somebody in the Jewish Museum of this bus company where you could take a tour of Berlin and you could get on and off because the buses run every hour. I didn't get off. I only got off once. But anyway, this is how I spent
Yeah, I've
4 hours.
done that in many cities.
Yeah, no, it was great, and it was so I'm not gonna I probably can't retrieve all the sites, but I got a feel for the old and the new architect. But I can say that's worth noting is the English language recording that I listened to as I went through Berlin didn't gloss over how terrible the German government was during the 30s. They were pretty candid about how many people about they were killing people and taking away democracy in the 30s when the Nazis came into power, and yet what you saw 75 years later from a city or the country which was essentially rubble, a word we use all the time these days in a different context, has recovered to be a thriving democracy and probably the strongest economy and the best country in Europe is Germany, and a very good friend of Israel in the way they support Israel. This is like a 13th century church, so I kind of tried to uh, get a sense of how the old and the new all sort of blended together. Okay,
Alan, do they still have a church that was bombed out on one of the main drags in Berlin? That when I was there, that was, I mean, this was 1980, but it was West Berlin. But it was a remnant of a bombed out church.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember that being mentioned.
Okay.
I'm going to take it to the synagogue that the ordination was that had, and we'll get to that in a minute. So this is the Berlin Wall as it looks today, which is not the way you would have seen it when you were in Germany, Rabbi. So they've made this wall into a bunch of murals. We only spent about 10 minutes off the bus taking pictures, so I can't speak to the nature. This was just a wide angle picture of what the Berlin Wall looks like sitting in what was East Berlin. So we're looking from the east side, and this part of the wall is now covered with these murals, which probably have a lot of significance. But I apologize, I didn't spend enough time to do that. And so we are just continuing to the end of the Berlin tour before we um, get to, well, the next event I wanted to mention is the European Cantors Association. They had a conference in Berlin that same week, not coordinated to my knowledge with anything else, except that I and some of my friends were there at the same time. So these are cantors from all of many countries of different denominations of Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. And so it was fun to spend an evening that. This is my cantor from Jerusalem, who was one of the people doing one of the selections. So that was nice. Now we're to the other historic point, the last one I wanted to cover, which is the ordination of the European Reform rabbis. This particular building was built in 1904, was substantially destroyed on Kristallnacht in 1938. And because that was, as we discussed, still West Berlin, and this synagogue was East Berlin. It was neglected until the remerging of East and West Berlin, and in 2004, the building as it looks now reopened, and it runs normally as a conservative synagogue, is the way it was described to me. But for the purpose of the ordination, it was run as as a Reform synagogue or Reform worship service. So it's got the architect of that period of early 20th century, and it was and now I'm gonna. This is my friend who became a rabbi and her daughter, and I want to just get to just a shot of of music as you look at. So it operates, in my opinion, of what we call it's what we would have called classical Reform Judaism, and to give you a sense of what might sound familiar to some of you, it certainly sounded familiar to me. Anybody recognize that type of music?
Right, yeah.
So the part I wanted to make about this service, it was conducted in German and in Hebrew. And if you know the history of Reform Judaism, in the early 19th century, the progressive Jews wanted to change from the rabbinate to have the vernacular in the worship services that were at that time only by held in Hebrew, and so that was one of the influences to create Reform Judaism in Germany, and when it was taken to America, Rabbi Isaac Meyer Wise, is the founder of what we think of as the Reform movement in North America, he added the other feature of mixed seating where men and women actually sit together. So I, knowing the history, appreciated that Rabbi Wise would have been very pleased that in his country, where he couldn't practice Judaism the way he tried to create it, he had to leave the country. We now have men and women praying together and German praying in a religious service. So I make this point because I see that is significant of what the Jewish community is doing in Germany, especially when you consider the events of World War II. And I am going to get to the end. This was the dinner at the dinner after the ordination, and now I just was impressed on how huge the Berlin and Munich airports are. I mean, and I happened to be there early in the morning and late at night, so there were never very many people, but the airports and the aisles were huge compared to even LAX, in my opinion.
Is that
And
Berlin or?
yeah, that was Berlin. That was
Boy, I was in a Berlin airport in 1980 and it was not that.
yeah, no, and I was in Munich. And I didn't have any pictures from Munich, but my connecting flight from Lufthansa from Tel Aviv to Berlin, it was the same airline, and you walk 45 minutes to get from one plane to the
Mhm.
next one. It's just huge.
Wow.
Anyway, my friends, thank you for letting me uh, go through my story. This is the shot at Berlin as we take off for Newark.
Okay,
So
I would say, Alan, stop
Very nice.
sharing so we can all see each other a little better. So
okay.
thank you.
Thank you so
Um,
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Alan.
you.
So do you get a sense, Al, I'm going to ask you some questions, if I may.
Of
Do you
course.
get a sense that the government will change? I think there's a scheduled election for prime minister for the Knesset. I think it's next year, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, the official, if it lasts that long, it's always that way in that form of government,
Yeah.
would be so it would be after the High Holy Days in 2026 is when the election would be.
And my sense is, that there's sort of great turmoil at the moment because it seems like Netanyahu has bowed to Trump and to others to end the war, in spite of the fact that, Hamas is not eliminated, but we're really in a very tenuous area where there are still outbreaks of violence both in Gaza and the West Bank. And so do you get a sense that people are hopeful that the
Oh,
war is in fact over or frightened
no,
that it may pop up again?
it's that uneasiness that I was trying to say at the beginning is because officially the government in Israel does not consider the war over.
Mm.
Okay, the terms that Israel nominally has agreed to with the 20-point Trump plan um, doesn't have to have said that so the prime minister and or the legislator has to say the war is over, and they haven't said that. What
Right.
they said is we will honor the ceasefire, even in spite of certain violations that Hamas is guilty of, and in spite of the fact that all of the dead hostages have not been returned, which is another violation that Hamas agreed to. Israel is carefully not walking away from the Trump plan.
Mm.
Uh,
Israel bombed Gaza today.
Oh, no.
yes, they did, and then one report, but I don't know the source, was like 20 people were killed or something like that.
But what they wanted to do with Iran, because now they said Iran is the most important to be change the government.
Say that again, please.
Israel is concerned about Iran, what they want to do with Ayatollah.
Well, the election, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that happened as of June of 2025 is that they're not regular daily threats by Iran with rockets. And the airspace over Iran has been essentially stopped because of the Israeli, maybe other countries, but certainly Israel controls the airspaces over Iran. But Iran is still a threat to Israel for sure, of course. But if I can move to your question, Michael, how does it look for the elections? And the answer is there's no, but there people are predicting that Netanyahu will be prime minister again, and there are people who predict they won't be. And that would be, and if he does get elected again, this is my understanding, the right wing forces won't be quite as strong. That the various parties in the moving parts are not happy with the very right wing behavior. Even the conservative people, the Likud people, are not happy with Mr. Ben-Gvir and Mr. Smotrich, who have added to some of the other internal challenges that Israel has. So Netanyahu could win again. This is my understanding. My opinion isn't important. My opinion of whether he shouldn't be is matter. But that's kind of my response to your question about the election. Do you want to go
Thank
any
you.
further on that?
No, I would like to make one other observation. I've been in a number of meetings between North American rabbis and Israeli rabbis, obviously
Okay,
on Zoom, over the
good.
last 2 years. And I just want you to get a sense of what it was like to be an Israeli rabbi. Now, obviously, we were talking to the Reform rabbis. So imagine, you're in a world where everybody you know is fighting. Every adult is fighting. Many of these rabbis were covering areas like in the north or near Gaza, where every one of your congregants has been displaced to another building, to another city. And you yourself are suffering these problems. Your kid's going to go to school. Where are you going to live? Your husband or wife is serving in an active role. Every one of your congregants is going through trauma. And of course, they called the rabbi when this happened. So what the rabbis went through, as we were talking to them, is almost unimaginable. For me, being a rabbi of a relatively peaceful world at a peaceful time, we have problems that arise, but I can't think of a single problem that is as serious as the least serious problem that these Reform rabbis were facing. And how do you keep your community together? How do you conduct services? It was just a nightmare, and it's powerful to see Israelis continuing to become rabbis. And in the early days of Reform Judaism in Israel, they were all basically American rabbis who went to Israel to serve Israeli congregations. And that's really not as authentic as Israeli was becoming rabbis.
So
Because,
now, yeah, good point. So I'll add to the ordination and the numbers. There's almost 150 Israeli trained Reform rabbis now. And that is only goes back 10 or 15 years, maybe a
yeah, there
little.
were almost none when I
Yeah,
was there.
right. And so, and the numbers are always different in Israel. I don't know how many were in your class in LA. How many were ordained your year you were ordained, Rabbi?
The year in Los Angeles, there were, I think, 13.
Okay, but if you add the three campuses at that time,
Yeah,
it
so
tended to
roughly,
be
I would say times three,
times three. The
about
ordination
40.
that I went to, there were six.
Mhm.
And the other characteristic that is not is true to some degree in America is the second career rabbis. 100% of those six rabbis had either were psychologists or teachers or they did other
You're
things.
talking about the Israelis.
The six Israelis, of which my friend was one
Yeah,
of
so I
them.
was talking about Americans, but
No, no, I did shift from that. I mean,
mhm,
because the six is a smaller number than the 50 in
mhm.
the year, and the numbers have run in the area of 30 to 50, right? I still think that every year we
For
get
the North Americans.
for the North America
Yeah.
for the U.S. campuses, but the Israeli numbers are smaller and let's say they're in the 10-ish number, but there were six that day
Mhm.
and you were a second career rabbi, but that was that was a minority. I don't know if it's still in a minority when you did it.
Yeah, I think when I did it, the college was encouraging second career rabbis. And then what happened was a lot of second career rabbis had trouble getting jobs, particularly women. So the movement, while it never stopped second career rabbis, it was not nearly as encouraging and supportive a few years after me of second career rabbis, men and women.
So I met a woman going out of the ordination who is a third career. She's 61, and in 2 years she'll be ordained. And she's told, I don't remember careers, but
Mhm.
she's in her third career, and it's kind of admirable that.
Well, you may not know this, Alan, but I actually ran several medical groups. So you could argue that I'm also in my third career.
Oh, okay. I'll accept that also. That's right. I think of you as this lowly physicist who
Right, that's me.
became a rabbi.
Mhm.
So, but we I forgot why we shifted onto the
Well,
number
I
of
was talking
women.
about just the plight of
Oh,
what it
yeah,
was
right.
like to be a rabbi in Israel.
Yes, and so you felt that, but the problem is NPR doesn't cover that, or MSNBC doesn't cover that. And so their sense of what happens in Israel is what you guys would I'm say you guys, what the average American sees who wants to know what's going on in Israel. You saw behind the scenes what I see behind the scenes. So in the first weeks after October 7th, and this is part of what you're reporting, is there were funerals every day.
Mhm.
And there are funerals every day because when an IDF soldier is killed, the English language news that I listen to, they announce the person and when the funeral is or
Mhm.
was. And so that sense of the impact of day-to-day life in Israel that you're relaying is and you see it multiplied because you talk to lots of rabbis, at the same
Mhm.
time in your meetings.
Mhm.
That's a sense of and no matter how you use the word admire or you shake your head and say how
Yeah.
can these people survive this kind of thing, but
Mhm.
they do.
Yeah.
Right. I would say I spoke at length a few days ago to my closest friends in Israel, not rabbis, and conservative. They're part of a conservative synagogue in a suburb of Jerusalem in Ramat Bet. And they said just about what you're both saying. I mean, there's nobody who isn't affected by this. And it's pervasive. And one of the things Marty Karp said to me, he and I worked together in the Federation for years, he in Israel and me in Los Angeles, is that you can't even say it's PTSD because we're still in the trauma.
That's right.
Mhm.
I've heard the exact same
Right,
thing.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
right. So no one knows exactly how they're going to start crawling out into normalcy. And my friends were not directly affected. They didn't have to leave their homes. They just had to keep running to the
Shelters.
safe room.
Mhm.
But their daughter with their grandchildren, they went to relatives in the States and stayed for 3 months,
Mhm.
you know?
Not easy.
Well, yeah. So, so it's hard to predict. Well, first of all, the healing part, as you said, Lois, is going to be a lot longer than than we might predict. But the just getting back to normal and
Right,
having a ceasefire and the rest of the hostages, each of these stages makes the Israelis breathe a little easier. And I saw that myself. And the synagogues, to your point, Rabbi, about the Israelis, they just have been totally overwhelmed with everything from counseling to funerals and in the case of Beit Daniel in Tel Aviv, they have two facilities, and one of them is in Jaffa, and they are like Beit Shmuel, the way you described it, Lois. They actually rent rooms out for guests. You know, they make money from that, but they had displaced people there. They still have them over 2 years. Not everybody is back to their homes yet, and they don't have that many rooms, so they have 50 or 60 rooms. So they managed to support the community in the southern part of Tel Aviv because they happen to have a lodging facility, which some people didn't have, and they ended up in hotel. You know, if you follow this, the displaced people ended up in hotels and other places around the state. But these things are still well, all getting better is the safe thing to say, but a ways to go.
Yeah. I'll just observe also that I don't know the details, but I know that many nations surrounding Israel are still technically at a state of war with the nation of Israel, the state of Israel, from 1948. That they had an armistice, but there are a few states that have peace treaties, notably Egypt and Jordan, and then some of the Abraham Accord countries entered into peace treaties. But a lot of nations surrounding Israel are still technically at a state of war. So it's a crazy world.
Yes, I mean, and that, it's a good point to make is Israelis who live there, just they're used to it. They just
Yeah.
know that when I went there in May and I started to experience sirens and rockets in the middle of the night, that was new to me. Uh,
Mhm.
but to them, they just take their dog and goes to the shelter and
right.
they go back to sleep. Yeah.
Someone I know that I've been communicating with over a new project. I think Alan knows that what I'm trying to do, which has become a mentor to executives of nonprofits in Israel. And anyway, I'm working on the project. But the guy who runs it, asked him once we were on a Zoom together, where are you? He said, I'm in my safe room. That's where he works. It's another room in the house.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. But
Okay.
it's quiet now. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very
Okay.
much
Yeah.
for
Thank
the
you,
time.
Alan, and thank you all. And I will, I'll have this sent out with my usual weekly email
Oh,
sometime.
since you didn't get to the rainbow thing, but I have this
Mhm.
music thing. If you, as a lighter thing, can I switch to screen and
Sure.
play the rainbow song? I was trying to do a transition to your formal thing, so I have let's see if I can screen share and get this and that will wrap it up in a, if I can find it, let's
Is
see.
the Muppets thing?
Yep, that is,
Okay.
okay, it seemed like when I came
Oh,
across
maybe I
it,
ought to do that next week.
yeah,
Actually, we won't meet next week. It's Erev Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
So,
Yeah.
but
Monday
we'll meet
night
in 2
though?
weeks. Monday night, we will have a class.
Okay.
Okay.
It's Purim parody.
Oh, I'm in the wrong place.
Why are there so many songs
Everybody hear it
about
okay?
Haman when we should be blotting his name? Haman's a villain, the worst one in Shushan. He made Mussolini look tame. His childhood idols were all genocidal. He'd kill on a brief passing whim. But someday we'll blot out the Haman remembrance and stop dressing kids up like him. Lie-da-di-di-da-di-dee. This year let's all keep our shirts on. Have we been half asleep, and have we heard Graggers? They're spinning around in my brain. We've tried to drown him out for thousands of years now, and maybe gone kind of insane. We've heard it too many times to ignore it in parodies tasteless and flat. But someday we'll blot out the Haman remembrance. Vet Parshandata, vet Alfon, vet Asvata, vet Porata, vet Adalia, vet Aridata, vet Parmashta, vet Arisai, vet Aridai, vet Vaizata. And stop baking treats like his hat. Lie-da-di-di-da-di-di. Lie-di-di-di-di-di-di.
Nice.
Yay.
Very nice. That was good.
I have a shorter version, but that I didn't get that. Anyway, it was just good.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thank
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
It was nice.